The construction worker's weathered hands shook as he counted crumpled bills at the Target checkout. $4.32 short. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, while impatient sighs rippled through the line behind him. Trevor Walsh's shoulders hunched forward, his calloused fingers fumbling to put back the milk, the bread, the basics his 6-year-old daughter needed. That's when she appeared. Silk scarf draped over designer shoulders, diamond earrings catching the harsh store lighting, the kind of polished elegance that made working men fade into background noise. "Please, allow me," she said, her manicured hand already reaching for a platinum credit card. His jaw clenched. He snatched his inadequate cash, shoved it deep into his worn jacket, and pushed past her without so much as a glance. The Millionaire CEO stood frozen in the checkout lane, completely ignored, watching him stride toward the exit. As he reached the automatic doors, she leaned forward and whispered just loud enough for him to hear. "Still remember me?" Trevor's boots scraped against the asphalt parking lot as he fumbled for his truck keys. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. That voice. Something familiar about it tugged at memories he'd buried deep. The October wind cut through his worn flannel shirt, but it wasn't the cold that made him shiver. He'd perfected the art of avoiding eye contact with wealthy strangers over the past 2 years. Since Jessica died, since everything fell apart, the old pickup groaned to life on the 3rd try. Trevor gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. In the rearview mirror, he caught a glimpse of the woman standing in the store entrance, watching him. Her silhouette seemed familiar, but he couldn't place it. Wouldn't let himself place it. Rich people didn't remember construction workers like him. They especially didn't remember broken ones. The drive home took 12 minutes through Riverside's quiet residential streets. 12 minutes of that woman's voice echoing in his head. The way she'd said those 3 words, like she actually knew him, like she'd been searching for him. Trevor shook his head and pulled into the cracked driveway of his rental house. The paint peeled from the shutters, and the front porch sagged under the weight of too many harsh winters. "Daddy!" Lily burst through the front door before he could even turn off the engine. 6 years old and all sunshine, despite everything she'd witnessed in her short life. Her strawberry blonde hair caught the afternoon light as she bounced on her toes. "Did you get the cereal?" The kind with the marshmallows. Her gap-toothed grin could still light up his darkest days, even when the grocery money came up short. Trevor knelt down and pulled her into a hug that lasted longer than usual. She smelled like finger paints and apple juice, like innocence he was desperate to protect. "Not this time, sweetheart. But I got you something better." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small packet of stickers he'd grabbed from the dollar bin. Lily's eyes went wide like he'd handed her diamonds. Inside their small living room, Trevor watched Lily arrange her new stickers on the coffee table with surgical precision. The couch springs creaked under his weight as he sank into the familiar depression his body had worn into the cushions. Bills sat stacked on the side table like accusers. Rent notice, electric company warning, doctor bills from Jessica's final months that would follow him to his grave. His phone buzzed against his leg. A text from his foreman. "Need you on the Morrison site early tomorrow." 6 a.m. sharp. Trevor typed back a quick response, grateful for the overtime hours. Every extra dollar meant another day they could stay in this house. Another day before he'd have to uproot Lily again. She'd already lost her mother. She couldn't lose her home, too. That night, after Lily had fallen asleep clutching her worn stuffed rabbit, Trevor sat on the front porch with a lukewarm beer. The October air carried the scent of burning leaves from a neighbor's yard. He touched the faded bracelet on his wrist without thinking. A habit he'd developed over the years. The woven threads had dulled from bright colors to muted browns and greens, but he'd never taken it off. Not once in 16 years. The memory hit him like a physical blow. A refugee camp on the Texas border. Himself at 18, full of purpose and naive hope. Teaching English by campfire light to families who'd lost everything crossing into a country that didn't want them. One girl in particular. Maria something. Big brown eyes full of determination despite the fear. She'd been about his age, maybe a little younger. Quick to learn, quicker to smile, even when the world seemed determined to break her spirit. Trevor's hand tightened around the beer bottle. That was impossible. The girl from the camp had nothing. No money, no connections, barely spoke English when they first met. She couldn't possibly be the woman from Target. The one with the designer clothes and platinum credit cards. The one whose voice had sounded so familiar, it made his chest ache with something he couldn't name. The next morning came too early. Trevor's alarm buzzed at 5:15, but he was already awake, staring at the water stain on his bedroom ceiling. He'd been dreaming about the camp again, about teaching English lessons under a makeshift canopy, about a girl who'd saved every scrap of paper he'd written on, treating his hastily scrawled grammar notes like precious manuscripts. At the construction site, Trevor lost himself in the familiar rhythm of physical labor. Hammer against nail. The screech of power saws cutting through lumber. Concrete dust coating his boots and settling in his lungs. Honest work that left him too tired to think about mysterious women or unpaid bills. His crew was building a community center in Riverside's downtown district. Something about affordable housing and social services. Trevor didn't pay much attention to the details. He just built what they told him to build. During his lunch break, Trevor sat on a stack of lumber and unwrapped the peanut butter sandwich he'd packed that morning. The autumn sun felt good on his face, warm enough to remind him that winter wasn't inevitable, even when everything else in his life felt like it was freezing over. That's when he saw her again. The same woman from Target walked across the construction site like she owned the place. She wore different clothes today. Dark slacks and a cream-colored blouse that probably cost more than Trevor made in a week. But it was definitely her. The same elegant posture, the same confident stride. She was talking to the site supervisor, gesturing towards the half-built structure with animated hands. Trevor ducked his head and focused intently on his sandwich. Maybe if he didn't look at her, she wouldn't notice him. Maybe she'd conduct whatever business brought her here and leave him alone with his questions and his memories. But when he glanced up again, she was walking directly toward him. "Excuse me," she said, stopping just close enough that he could smell her perfume. Something floral and expensive. "I'm Veronica Sterling. I'm with the development company overseeing this project." She extended her hand like she expected him to shake it, like they were equals. "I wanted to personally thank all the workers for the excellent craftsmanship." Trevor wiped his palm on his jeans before accepting her handshake. Her skin was soft against his calloused fingers, soft and warm and somehow familiar. "Just doing my job, Mom." He tried to keep his voice neutral, professional. Tried not to stare at her face too long, but something about her features nagged at him, the shape of her eyes, the way she tilted her head when she spoke. Sterling Construction has built dozens of these community centers across the country. She continued, seemingly oblivious to his discomfort. "But this one feels special. Personal somehow. She paused, studying his face with an intensity that made him want to look away. "Have we met before? You seem familiar." "I don't think so." Trevor stood up, brushing crumbs from his work shirt. "I'd remember meeting someone like you." The words came out harsher than he intended. Someone like you, rich, successful. Everything he wasn't, everything Jessica would never get the chance to become. Veronica's expression softened. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to bother you during your break." She turned to walk away, then paused. "Actually, there is something. The community center is going to offer English as a second language classes when it opens. We're looking for volunteers with teaching experience. Someone mentioned you might have a background in education." Trevor's blood turned to ice water in his veins. "Who told you that?" Nobody at the construction site knew about his past, about the refugee camp or the scholarship he'd lost or the dreams he'd buried along with his wife. He kept that part of his life locked away where it couldn't hurt anymore. I must have misunderstood." Veronica backed up a step, clearly sensing his sudden tension. "I apologize for the confusion." But her eyes never left his face, like she was trying to solve a puzzle, like she was seeing something he didn't want her to see. That evening, Trevor sat at his kitchen table helping Lily with her homework, while pasta boiled on the stove. She was practicing writing the alphabet, her tongue poking out in concentration as she formed each letter. Her handwriting was getting better. Neat rows of A's and B's that would make any teacher proud. Jessica would have been proud. "Daddy, why do you look sad?" Lily set down her pencil and studied his face with 6-year-old directness. Kids had a way of cutting through adult pretenses with surgical precision. "Did something bad happen at work?" "Nothing bad, sweetheart." Trevor reached over and smoothed her hair behind her ear. "Just thinking about old friends." The lie tasted bitter in his mouth, but how could he explain the truth? That he was remembering a girl from another lifetime, a girl who couldn't possibly be the successful businesswoman who kept appearing in his life like some kind of beautiful ghost. The next few days passed in a blur of routine. Work, dinner, homework, bedtime stories. Trevor threw himself into the familiar patterns, hoping they would quiet the questions multiplying in his head. But Veronica Sterling seemed to be everywhere. She visited the construction site twice more that week, always finding reasons to speak with the workers, always seeming to gravitate toward wherever Trevor was standing. On Friday afternoon, she approached him during the final cleanup. Most of the crew had already left, but Trevor stayed late to organize tools and secure materials for the weekend. The site was quiet except for the distant hum of traffic and the rustle of autumn leaves in the oak trees that bordered the property. "Working late again?" Veronica's voice carried across the empty lot. She walked toward him carefully, mindful of the scattered debris and construction materials. Today she wore jeans and a simple white sweater. Casual clothes that made her look younger, more like the girl he'd been trying not to remember. "Overtime pays better." Trevor didn't look up from the power tools he was loading into their cases. "Every dollar counts." He immediately regretted saying it. She didn't need to know about his financial struggles. Rich people didn't want to hear about working-class problems. "I understand that feeling better than you might think." She stopped a few feet away, close enough that he could see the small scar above her left eyebrow. A thin white line that looked old. Childhood injury, maybe. "I wasn't always this." She gestured to herself with a self-deprecating smile. The expensive clothes and company car are relatively recent developments. Trevor finally looked at her directly. Really looked. And for just a moment, with the golden afternoon light hitting her face at the right angle, he saw something that made his chest tighten with recognition. The shape of her smile, the way she clasped her hands together when she was nervous. Features that had been softer 16 years ago, younger, marked by fear instead of success. Maria. The name escaped his lips before he could stop it. Barely a whisper, a prayer to a past he'd tried to forget. Veronica's entire body went still. Her carefully composed expression cracked, revealing something raw underneath. Hope mixed with uncertainty. Joy battling against disbelief. "You do remember." Her voice broke on the last word. "I wasn't sure you would. I've changed so much since the refugee camp." Trevor set down the drill he'd been holding. His hands were shaking again. Riverside Crossing. 2008. You were just a kid. We both were. The memories flooded back now that he'd opened the door. Teaching English by candlelight, helping families navigate immigration paperwork. A girl who'd worn the same donated clothes every day, but somehow managed to find reasons to smile. "You taught me more than English," Maria said softly. Veronica. He had to remember she was Veronica now. "You taught me to believe I could become something more than a scared refugee girl, that I was stronger than I knew." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small notebook. The cover was worn smooth from years of handling. "I still have it. Every lesson you wrote down for me." Trevor stared at the notebook like it was a ghost made solid. He remembered buying it at a dollar store in town, remembered staying up late writing grammar exercises and vocabulary lists. He'd thought it was such a small thing at the time, just helping a kid who was eager to learn. What happened after the camp closed? How did you become—" He gestured helplessly at her expensive clothes, the luxury car parked at the curb. "Scholarships first. Then student loans that took me 10 years to pay off. I studied computer science at UT Austin." Maria's smile was soft with memory. "Started my first company in my dorm room. Failed spectacularly. Started another one. Failed again. But every time I wanted to give up, I remembered what you told me. That setbacks weren't failures, they were lessons. That I was stronger than I knew. I can't believe it's really you." Trevor felt like he was standing outside his own body, watching this conversation happen to someone else. All these years, I wondered what happened to the families from the camp. Whether any of you made it. Whether the English lessons actually helped. He laughed, but it came out shaky. "Looks like they did." Maria stepped closer. Close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. The same eyes that had looked at him with such trust and determination all those years ago. "They saved my life, Trevor. Those lessons, your belief in me. You have no idea how many times I wanted to find you and say thank you. So why now?" The question came out rougher than he intended. "Why show up in my life now, when—" He gestured toward himself. The work clothes, the exhaustion written in every line of his face. The obvious signs that he was barely keeping his head above water. "When I'm not exactly the success story you became." Something shifted in Maria's expression. The businesswoman mask slipped completely, replaced by the earnest girl he remembered. "Because I've been looking for you for 5 years, ever since I had the resources to hire investigators. I wanted to thank you properly, and I wanted—" She paused, seeming to gather courage. "I wanted to help you the way you helped me. I don't need charity." Trevor's defensive walls slammed back into place. "I don't care how successful you are now. I can take care of my daughter and myself." Even as he said it, he knew how hollow it sounded. The past due bills on his kitchen table said otherwise. "It's not charity." Maria's voice was gentle but firm. "It's gratitude. There's a difference." She glanced around the construction site. "This community center we're building? It's going to offer ESL classes, job training, childcare services, all the things I wished had been available when my family was struggling to get established. I need someone to run the programs, someone who understands what it's like to start over with nothing." Trevor felt the ground shifting under his feet. "You're offering me a job?" The idea was too big to process, too good to be possible. "I'm a construction worker, Maria. I haven't taught anyone anything in 16 years. I wouldn't know where to start." "You'd start the same place you started with me." "By believing people are capable of more than their circumstances suggest." Maria pulled a business card from her purse. Heavy cardstock with raised lettering. The kind of card that cost more to print than Trevor spent on lunch. "Think about it. You don't have to decide right now. But the offer stands." That night, after Lily was asleep, Trevor sat at his kitchen table staring at the business card. Veronica Sterling, CEO, Sterling Development Group. A phone number with a local area code. An email address that looked impossibly professional. He turned the card over and found handwritten words on the back. "Still the same Maria who believes you're stronger than you know." The next morning brought a phone call that changed everything. Trevor's foreman delivered the news with characteristic bluntness. "Company's downsizing. Morrison project's been delayed indefinitely. Budget cuts. I'm sorry, Walsh, but you're laid off effective immediately." The line went dead before Trevor could respond. He sat in his truck in the construction site parking lot, staring at his phone screen. No job meant no income. No income meant no rent money. No rent money meant... He couldn't finish the thought. Not with Lily depending on him. Not when he was the only parent she had left. Trevor pulled Maria's business card from his wallet. The raised lettering felt expensive under his fingertips. Foreign, like something from a world he didn't belong to. But Lily's gap-toothed smile flashed in his memory, followed by the stack of overdue bills on his kitchen table. Pride was a luxury he couldn't afford anymore. He dialed the number before he could lose his nerve. "Sterling Development Group? This is Veronica." Her voice was crisp, professional. The voice of someone who made important decisions and commanded respect. Nothing like the nervous teenager who'd struggled with English verb conjugations. "It's Trevor. Trevor Walsh." He cleared his throat, suddenly unsure what to say. "The construction worker from the community center site. You offered me a position running programs, and I think I'd like to discuss it." The silence stretched long enough that Trevor wondered if the call had dropped. Then Maria's voice came back, softer now, more like the girl he remembered. "I'm so glad you called. When can we meet? I'd love to show you what we're planning for the center." 2 hours later, Trevor found himself in a coffee shop downtown, sitting across from the woman who used to be Maria Herrera. She'd ordered them both lattes and a plate of pastries he probably couldn't afford to buy himself. The irony wasn't lost on him. Once again, she was the one with resources while he was the one in need. The ESL program would serve about 50 families initially, Maria explained, sliding a folder across the small table. Mostly recent immigrants from Central America. A lot of them are in situations similar to what my family faced 16 years ago. They need someone who understands their challenges, Someone who won't judge them for starting over. Trevor opened the folder and found detailed program outlines, budget projections, staffing plans. Everything looked professional and well thought out, like Maria had been planning this for months, maybe years. "This is impressive," he admitted, "but I'm still not sure I'm the right person. I dropped out of college, Maria. I never finished my education degree." "You finished my education," she said quietly, "and dozens of other people's educations. Do you remember the Gonzalez family? 3 kids under 10, parents who spoke no English at all? You spent every evening for 2 months teaching them basic conversational skills. Mrs. Gonzalez got a job at the hospital because she could communicate with patients. She's a registered nurse now." Trevor's memory supplied images he'd tried to forget. Late nights in the camp's makeshift classroom. Families crowded around folding tables, practicing pronunciation and grammar. The frustration of trying to cram years of education into weeks or months before the camp closed or families were relocated. I always wondered what happened to them. I kept in touch with some of the families over the years, the ones who had email addresses or phone numbers. Most of them made it, Trevor. They built lives here, started businesses, sent their kids to college, became citizens. The foundation you helped give them made all the difference. Maria reached across the table and touched his hand. "You changed lives. You can do it again." The weight of her words settled over him like a blanket, heavy but warm. "What about Lily?" "My daughter. I can't take evening classes or work weekends. She's only 6, and she's already lost her mother. I can't ask her to sacrifice anymore. The center will have an after-school program and full-time childcare. Lily would be welcome any time you're working. And the position comes with health insurance, paid vacation, and a salary that—" Maria named a figure that made Trevor's coffee cup rattle against the saucer. More money than he'd made in his best year of construction work. Enough to pay off his debts and maybe even start saving for Lily's future. "Why?" The question burst out of him before he could stop it. "Why are you doing this?" "You don't owe me anything, Maria. I was just a volunteer doing what anyone would have done. You've already paid me back 1,000 times over by becoming successful. By proving that the system can work." Maria was quiet for a long moment, stirring her latte with deliberate precision. When she looked up, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. Because 16 years ago, a boy not much older than me believed I could become something more than my circumstances. He saw potential where everyone else saw problems. He gave me homework assignments and vocabulary lists like I was a real student instead of a refugee kid who might disappear tomorrow. Her voice cracked slightly. "I want to give other people that same gift, but I can't do it alone. I need someone who remembers what it feels like to have nothing but hope." Trevor stared down at his hands wrapped around the warm coffee cup. Calloused fingers that had built things, fixed things, held his daughter when nightmares woke her in the middle of the night. Could these same hands teach again? Could he become the person Maria believed him to be? "When would I start?" "The center opens in 6 weeks. We'd need to begin recruiting students and setting up the classroom spaces immediately." Maria's smile was radiant. The same smile that had lit up the camp's dim meeting tent when she'd successfully conjugated her first irregular verb. "Are you saying yes?" "I'm saying I'll try." Trevor felt something loosen in his chest, a knot he'd been carrying for 2 years without realizing it. "I can't promise I'll be as good as you remember. I'm not the same person I was at 18. Life has a way of wearing people down. Life also has a way of revealing who we really are when everything else gets stripped away." Maria closed the folder and extended her hand across the table. "Welcome to the team, Professor Walsh." Professor Walsh. The title felt foreign and familiar at the same time. Like a coat he'd outgrown, but might still be able to wear if he let out the seams. Trevor shook her hand and tried to imagine himself in front of a classroom again, teaching verb tenses and vocabulary words to families who'd risked everything for a chance at something better. That evening, Trevor knelt beside Lily's bed as she settled under her covers with her stuffed rabbit. Her room was small but cozy, decorated with her artwork and the few family photos that hadn't been too painful to display. Jessica smiled at them from frames on the nightstand, frozen in happier moments that felt like someone else's life. "Daddy, you look different tonight," Lily observed, studying his face with her usual intensity. "Like when you used to smile more." Before Mommy got sick. Trevor smoothed her hair back from her forehead. "How would you feel about making some big changes, sweetheart? Moving to a new house, maybe? Daddy getting a new job where he teaches people instead of building things?" Lily's eyes went wide with excitement. "Like a real teacher? With a classroom and everything?" When Trevor nodded, she clapped her hands together. "Will you teach me too? I want to learn everything." "You already know the most important thing," Trevor said, kissing her forehead. "You know how to see the good in people, even when they can't see it in themselves." "That's the best lesson anyone can learn." As he turned off the lights and closed Lily's door, Trevor felt something he hadn't experienced in 2 years. Hope. Real hope. Not just the desperate kind that got him through each day. Maria had given him more than a job. She'd given him back a piece of himself he'd thought was lost forever. 3 months later, the Riverside Community Center buzzed with activity every evening. 53 students attended the ESL program, ranging in age from 16 to 72. They came from El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, all carrying stories of loss and struggle and impossible dreams. All hungry to learn the language that might transform their American experience from survival to success. Trevor stood at the front of Classroom A, watching his intermediate students practice conversational English in pairs. Mrs. Chen helped Mr. Rodriguez with pronunciation, while teenage sisters from Guatemala quizzed each other on irregular verbs. The room smelled like coffee and hope, and the particular energy that came from people working hard to improve their lives. "Excellent progress tonight, everyone," Trevor announced as the evening session wound down. "Remember, practice makes better, not perfect. Perfect is the enemy of progress." It was something he'd learned to tell himself as much as his students. Some days he still felt like he was pretending to be a teacher. Other days he remembered why he'd loved this work in the first place. After the students left, Trevor found Maria in her office, reviewing applications for the center's new job training program. She'd been there almost every day since the center opened, working alongside staff and volunteers like she was still the eager refugee girl, instead of a multi-millionaire CEO. "Good night tonight," she asked, looking up from her paperwork. She'd long since given up the designer suits in favor of more practical clothes, jeans and sweaters that wouldn't look out of place in a classroom or community meeting. The Ramirez family got their citizenship test results back. They passed. Trevor couldn't keep the pride out of his voice. All 4 of them. Carlos wants to apply to community college next semester. His wife is talking about nursing school. "Just like the old days," Maria said softly. "Watching people discover what they're capable of." She set down her pen and leaned back in her chair. "Any regrets about leaving construction work?" Trevor considered the question seriously. Sometimes I miss the simplicity of it. Build the thing according to the plans. Clock out at 5. No emotional investment required. He paused, thinking about teenage Esperanza, who'd cried when she read her first complete sentence in English. About elderly Mr. Vega, who practiced pronunciation while waiting for the bus every morning. But I forgot how good it feels to help someone become who they're meant to be. "You gave me that gift 16 years ago," Maria said. "I'm glad we could give it back to you." She stood up and gathered her papers. "Same time tomorrow?" "Same time tomorrow," Trevor agreed. "Thanks, Maria. For everything. For remembering me. For believing I could still do this." He paused at the door. "For helping me remember who I used to be. You never stopped being that person," she replied. "You just needed someone to remind you." The drive home took Trevor through Riverside's quiet residential streets, past the elementary school where Lily was thriving in 2nd grade, past the small house they'd been able to keep, thanks to steady paychecks and health insurance, past the cemetery where Jessica rested under an oak tree, her grave marker finally paid for and decorated with fresh flowers every week. At home, Lily was already in her pajamas, homework completed, and laid out neatly on the kitchen table for Trevor's review. She was reading a chapter book now, her finger following along under each word. Growing up faster than he was ready for, but growing up strong and confident and kind. "How was school today, sweetheart?" Trevor asked, settling beside her on the couch. "Good. Mrs. Patterson said I could help the new girl, Elena. She just moved here from Mexico and doesn't speak much English yet." Lily looked up from her book with Jessica's earnest expression. "I told her my daddy teaches English to grown-ups." Maybe he could teach her family too. Trevor felt that familiar tightening in his chest. Pride mixed with wonder at the person his daughter was becoming. "Maybe he could," he agreed. "Would you like to come to the center sometime? Meet some of the students?" "Can I really?" Lily's eyes lit up with excitement. "I want to see where you teach people to be stronger than they know." That phrase had become something of a motto around the center, painted on a banner in the main hallway in both English and Spanish. Students wrote it on index cards and taped them to bathroom mirrors. Parents repeated it to children struggling with homework, a reminder that circumstances didn't define limits. Later that night, after Lily was asleep, Trevor sat on his front porch with a cup of coffee and thought about the strange path that had brought him here. 2 years ago, he'd been counting coins at a checkout counter, too proud and too broken to accept help from a stranger. Tonight, he was planning lessons for students who reminded him daily why hope was worth the risk. His phone buzzed with a text from Maria. New family arriving tomorrow. Mother and 3 kids from Guatemala. Could use extra attention in beginner's class. Then a follow-up message. Thank you for saying yes to this. To all of it. You're changing lives again. Trevor typed back. Thank you for remembering me. Then he deleted it and wrote, instead, thank you for helping me remember myself. 16 years ago, a teenage volunteer and a refugee girl had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances. Tonight, a single father and a successful businesswoman were building something together that honored both their journeys. Some stories, Trevor reflected, were worth waiting decades to complete. In the morning, there would be new students to welcome, new dreams to nurture, new opportunities to prove that believing in people's potential could transform not just their lives, but your own. For now, Trevor Walsh sat in the quiet darkness of his front porch, stronger than he'd known he could be, ready for whatever came next,